Hi, welcome to Work Your Energy podcast. And today we have a really incredible guest who is Jonathan from Behold Retreats. And we're going to be talking about the benefits of psilocybin and and how it can transform our lives in a relatively short time when you compare it to other things that we can do in our lives. So, hi, Jonathan, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm really well, thanks, Elizabeth, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to have this great conversation with you. So, thank you for the invitation.
No, well, you're welcome. You're welcome, and likewise for me as well. As we just talked about briefly, I do discuss psilocybin in my new book, and the reason I'm discussing it is because I'm talking about us being able to connect more with the energy fields and how we have these sort of inhibitors in our brain which stop us from connecting, if you like, to the full extent of what we have around us in the energy field. And so how I mentioned psilocybin and how I like it is the fact that it gives us that opportunity to experience more than what we are, and to, if you like, lift the inhibitors off and experience, the more of the energy field, more of what's around us. And as I was saying before, once we've experienced that, we can't go back to who we were before. We can't go back to normal life. And I sort of feel that's how these mind-altering drugs work, that they, in a sense, introduce you to the person, more than who you are. They introduce you to more than your physical self. And once you've been introduced to that spiritual, higher self, you can't go back to that physical body, that physical person that you were before. And it just completely transforms your life. And that's why I think it pulls us out of depression so fast. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, there's a lot to build upon from what you've just said. I think in a broad sense, I completely agree with everything that you've said. I think these are medicines that amplify our sensitivity to what is. And so it gives us access to parts of reality or parts of our subconscious that perhaps we didn't have easy access to through everyday, shall we say, normal consciousness. And so in these expanded states, we're really able to travel within and to experience ourselves in new and exciting ways and connect with the good things, right? The joy, the love, all of the emotions that perhaps sometimes we feel are a bit muted in our everyday lives. But then also it's common for lower level emotions, lower level vibrations to also be surfaced, right? Traumas from our childhood, past experiences that were painful, experiences where perhaps we didn't act as beautifully as we might have liked to. There's very profound lessons that are available through these experiences. One of the things that I found very interesting and I think is important in relation to this work is that psychedelics, psilocybin or otherwise, are not necessarily positive in of themselves. I think they're a very powerful tool. It's the intentionality, it's the container, it's the preparation before a ceremony or a retreat, and it's the integration work after a retreat. So doing the mental and emotional work is such a fundamental aspect of truly benefiting from this work. Like, you can go take some psychedelics and perhaps you'll have a profound experience, perhaps you have a challenging experience, but it's actually very easy to land back where you were before. You're going to have this, story to tell perhaps, but, I think as you alluded to at the beginning of our chat, what you're trying to do is to raise your consciousness, and you're trying to do so in a sustainable fashion. And so what some of the science has shown, and I think this is particularly interesting, is that these medicines are great for, number one, helping us to connect to our sense of joy and who we are. Number two, our sense of spirituality and connection with the sacred. And number three, and perhaps most importantly, it does not remove our feelings of negativity and toxicity. So these are the things that often are tucked away from what we see in ourselves. There are our mental and emotional blind spots. And so that's why sometimes, they talk about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. It can be really helpful with these experiences to have someone who's helping us see our own minds in preparation for these experiences. And then, for me, my own journey, my own experience has been that when those things are true in relation to you having a deep understanding of the opportunities for self-improvement coming into the medicine work and setting that deep intention, then the medicines and these experiences can really respond in kind and facilitate really radical transformations in perception of self and indeed the outside world. So it's amazing work. It's, it helps me bounce out of bed every single morning to just be able to do this work and to help people as I've been helped. That's what the motivation behind for me for establishing this business is. Like, look, if I could just help one person in the way that I've been helped, like, it's all worthwhile. It doesn't matter the expense. It doesn't matter any of the other stuff. It's just like, wow, there's something here that is so magical.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think that's what drives all of us, isn't it? That's exactly what I felt when I wrote my book. If this book just helps one person, then it's been worth, the years it's taken of researching. So what you're saying essentially is that it doesn't get rid of the negativity, but it pulls it up to the surface so that we can work on it. So it creates the awareness, it shows it to us, yeah. And then we can then work on it and understand more about it and work it out of our system. Is that what you're helping people do through the retreats?
Yeah, so I'm going to give an example. So perhaps someone, because I know you're such a student of consciousness, one of the ways that I sometimes radically oversimplify consciousness is to speak about people being in victim mode, in egoic mode, in kind of interdependent collaborative mode, or mystical, right? And, we can all travel between these forms of consciousness, but we also have kind of a base state, right? So if we're working with someone, say, who is stuck in victim consciousness, they see themselves as at the effect of the world, right? So everything is out there and they don't see themselves as powerful. They see themselves as the victim of everything that's happening around them. Now, if someone of that nature was to go into one of these experiences, having first, say, a few coaching or therapy sessions to really understand what's going on in the mind when they think that way, then when they step into ceremony, these can be, it's a lot easier to surface and to process these lower level emotions, because it can be painful, right? There's going to be shame, there's going to be guilt, there's going to be fear, there might be anger. There's going to be very powerful emotions that could potentially rise to the surface as we try to understand and we start to unpack what it is the person tries to unpack, what it is that sits behind their victim consciousness. So, for me, if I speak honestly and transparently, some of the character traits that used to limit me in my time as a strategy and management consulting for many years, in the corporate world, was frustration and impatience. Right. And honestly, sometimes that can serve you, but honestly, it can get in your way and it can really damage client relationships and relationships with the team. And you can let yourself down as a result of that. And so, I saw in myself certainly that there was times and instances where my frustration and impatience was almost indescribable. Like it rose to the surface out of nowhere. And it was like, I didn't know where that energy was coming from. And so when I was able to connect back to some of my early childhood traumas and release the energies associated with it, it's not to say that I never get impatient and I never get frustrated. I still do. But the intensity and the strength and the hold at which those emotions used to have over me, it's nothing like what it used to be. And so it's a big shift that has just benefited me in so many ways. And so, we all have childhood trauma, like virtually all of us, even those of us who came from loving parents and had a beautiful, great upbringing. There's things that impacted you because your parents were impacted. And, even though they had all the love and all the care in the world, we all have childhood trauma. So there's things there, limiting beliefs, fears, negativity, lower vibrations that are keeping us from seeing what we truly are. And so as we unpack and unfold and release more of these lower level vibrations, we raise in consciousness, we're strengthening our spiritual connection and able to tap much more deeply into our intuition, our sense of self, and feel confident and empowered in who we are as we walk the path of the miracle that is the human experience.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is that that we still have frustrations, impatience, anger, all these things to deal with in our world, but we're coming at it from a different place. We're no longer seeing it as, that we are victims to this and we have to accept it or sit in it. We're now seeing it as, well, okay, this is interesting. Let's explore this. Let's observe what's happening. Let's see what part I play in it. And let's see, if I change myself and I change my behavior, let's see if it changes on the outside of me, which from my own experience of consciousness and working on my own mindset over the past few years, this is what's changed. My life hasn't changed, but I've changed. So how I relate to it is more positive. It's different. And is this how the psilocybin works? It changes you so that you then start to relate to life in a different way, in a more positive way for you? Or does it just give you amazing transformations where, a bit like I can equate it to the near-death analogy. So the people who've had near-death experiences in their life come back so transformed that they're just completely different, and they just have amazing lives, and they start to see life in a different way. So the psilocybin, maybe they have sort of these transformational moments, and it allows them to see beyond their life, to see beyond the physical, if you like.
Yeah. And I think, in relation to how these medicines work, you could speak to 50 well-informed people on the subject and receive 50 different answers, just based upon the nature of the individual and how they see this work. One of the ways that I like to describe it to a more rational audience is to talk about decompartmentalization of the brain. So if I speak from my own personal experience, when I was managing a large team of 150 consultants, multiple clients, many projects, the brain becomes quite overwhelmed, actually, with the amount of stimulus in the world. And so when that takes place, we become patterned in the way that we think, in the way that we act. And that sounds like efficient, it sounds positive, but it's actually super dangerous. And so there's a network in the brain that's called the default mode network that begins to kind of command and control the traffic in the brain. And so what tends to happen, and you can see this in the MRI scans and some of the research that they've done on psilocybin in particular, is that the brain, only a few regions of the brain are able to interact with a few other regions of the brain. So another way of saying that is that a small subset of neural pathways are just being overused tremendously. So we've actually lost a great deal of the function in our brain. And so in contrast, when you look at an MRI of a Westerner pre-psilocybin, shall we say, versus actively working with psilocybin, you can see it's a much more beautiful photo. It's a much higher degree of interactivity between the regions of the brain. Now, some of the reason that we have these profound experiences is that we're reconnecting parts of the brain that haven't been able to speak to one another, right? So the trauma that we had as a child that was compartmentalized away because it was too painful, we don't actually have a conscious memory of the experience. That comes back all of a sudden. That's a very powerful experience. These medicines are also what is described as neurogenetic, which means that they facilitate the new growth of neurons in the brain. So you actually get more brain cells through these medicines, which is something that most people can get behind. And then, if you were to contrast the MRI of a Western brain with psilocybin next to a Buddhist monk with 20 years meditation practice, there's a lot of similarity, right? All the regions of the brain are talking to all the regions of the brain. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a unified consciousness, not this decompartmentalized, deterministic, calculator. And so for me, the journey has been de-patterning. I spent most of my professional life establishing a very effective machine, shall we say, and now I'm working on developing the organism, the organic organism, rather than the machine, and it's a very different feeling in relation to the consciousness and my experience of the world, my experience of myself, and that's one. I would describe that as one aspect, as one way to describe the nature of this work, and there's innumerable, because these are such shall we say, profound and unifying experiences. You could talk about it from this perspective of the heart. You could talk about it from this perspective of the spirit. You could talk about it from the perspective of, the receptors in the brain, and go really neuro nerd on it. You could talk about it in relation to vibration and how these medicines help us unify mind, body, heart, and spirit, and to bring them into a single vibration so that we can move up into higher states of consciousness. So there's many ways to describe it, but I think one of the ways that I often characterize this work is that you can see it's working there's clinical trials for depression, for anxiety, for OCD, for addictive disorders, for stroke victims, for autoimmune disorders, for cancer, for end-of-life patients. And you start to look at this long list of all of these potential applications. You go, wait a minute, what's going on here? Is it that psychedelics cure everything? And it's actually that most of our problems are a reflection of consciousness. They start in our brain and then they are reflected through the physical body. But the manifestation is of mind, and so as we begin to cure our minds, then we can begin to unravel the root cause of the issue. And then that translates into our thinking, into our behavior, into our actions, and fundamentally into our bodies.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about the research I did for my book. So in a sense, because we're not accessing the full sort of capacity of our brain, that in a sense we are only working with a smaller amount of consciousness, as in we are, that consciousness is that we are only able to access I don't know how to describe it really, because I know that there's a very, very big debate around whether consciousness is generated from our brain or whether it's actually outside of us, or not outside of us, but part of the energy field that we exist in, and I think it's the latter. So I know that we are part of the energy field. We are made from the energy field. We are all part of it. So I understand that, but I can also see from my interpretation of it is that we're constantly always being upgraded with the energy field, with the consciousness of the energy field. So in a sense, the more we release raise our own vibration, and the more we manage to, if you like, rewire our pathways, our neural pathways, then the more we are working in a higher vibration with consciousness. If that makes sense.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautiful. And I think that's exactly it, right? I think what becomes evident through these experiences is that reality itself is subjective. And so it's much as we have big shifts in how we see ourselves and the world and the universe and the relationship between them, then we can be much more empathetic towards others who see the world in a very different way. And so I think, that's part of this journey that we're on, I think in a particularly strong way collectively at the moment, is to be able to grow to honor the subjectivity of experience, because perception is reality. And so once we've had the rug, I'm going to describe it as having the rug pulled out from under ourselves 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 times, and our understanding of reality has shifted over and over and over again. It's like, oh yeah, everyone's living in their own little reality, and there is no consensus truth or absolute truth that exists, because we're all having our own experience. And so to be able to engage with that, understanding that we're all just here having our own experiences and trying to bounce off one another and make sense of things, really shifts the perception of some of the, shall we say, deep collective problems that we're facing in these times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I'm someone I have to have meaning in my life. I have to feel that I'm here for a reason, and that there is meaning to my life. I've always been like that. And to a certain extent, I've probably found my meaning, rather than my meaning finding you. I don't think that our purpose, meaning, finds us. I think that we get to, a point in our life where we are able to actively decide what our purpose and our meaning is. And I think that's usually comes around through experience. So for you, obviously, you've now found your, this is now what you want to do. You want to do this and help the world in this way. And likewise, with my book and my own research. But tell me a bit about your story then. So how did you get into this? I think people will be interested to hear that.
Yeah, happy to share. To be honest, I think of myself as a bit of an unlikely candidate in the sense that I was an atheist. I was, as I shared before, in the corporate world, and pursuing what I thought success looked like in that rational, material worldview. Right, so chasing more clients, bigger deals, the next promotion, all that stuff. I was living in Hong Kong for 5 years before I decided to take a year off, and so Hong Kong is a kind of work hard, play hard sort of environment. A lot of expat foreigners there for career oriented reasons. And yeah, after, for me, it was about 5 years into my time there that I just recognized that I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know where to go. It was the life that I was living wasn't going to bring me any incremental meaning or purpose or joy. More money, a bigger apartment, like all that stuff didn't have any luster. There was no magic left in success in that paradigm. And so I didn't know what the answer was. And being atheistic, I didn't think that the answer could possibly be spiritual in its nature. But I just decided to take a year off and to see what would fill the vacuum. And I spent most of that time traveling through South America, and ultimately wound up at a first ayahuasca retreat with two friends of mine in Peru. And for me, honestly, it was what I needed, but I wasn't particularly prepared for the experience. I didn't recognize the potential intensity of the experience, and I had a very challenging experience, very profound, but also very challenging. And then finally, I also wasn't really guided following the experience itself. So I didn't really integrate the experience well because I just didn't know what to do. Here I was walking in, an atheist, walking out having had these wild spiritual and sometimes very challenging / terrifying experiences that I just did not know how to bring back into this 3D miracle reality level, this dimension. And so, yeah, it took me about a year. I turned to meditation. I turned to reading some spiritual books, began to make a little bit more sense of things myself. And then began working with more plant medicine. So my journey has really been just over the past 5 years now, and through my own experiences, through my own pursuing of retreats around the world and working with private healers as well, I really came to recognize that what I went through was what I needed, but that there was, shall we say, a better way in terms of helping people be prepared, in terms of helping people understand what they're getting themselves into, making sure that they're prepared for the intensity of these experiences. And so, yeah, it started with, being motivated to be able to host and facilitate retreats for my friends, and to do that at a really high level, those in my business network as well. And then it just naturally evolved into Behold Retreats from there. So, we place, I would say, a much stronger emphasis on the mental and emotional aspects of this work. And that is, to me, it's just so fundamental. If you want to benefit from plant medicine, from psychedelics, you have to do the work. This is no magic pill that solves all our problems. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm sure many people can relate to that. And yeah, of course, there's no magic pill with anything. It's like, we sort of we come to this world in order to to find our way out of it. I sometimes feel like it's trying to find your way out of a really challenging maze, and turning which way in that, making decisions to go through. It does feel like that sometimes, and sort of when you find that chink of light, and you find that sort of, I don't know, epiphany or transformation or whatever, you then feel that you want to pass it back to the people behind you, which I think is probably what we're all doing, and what the people in the past have done as well. We find our way through, and then we want to help others find their way through. And it seems to me that's the same for you too.
Yeah, beautifully said. I love that. And I think, we're all here to give. I think each of us is not some random permutation of genes, right? We're all here at this time to work on ourselves, and to give to others, right? And to be in relationship. And I think as we tap into our unique gifts and our unique capacities, then the world just becomes a better and better place. And I think we're in the middle of a big shift from this fear and scarcity based paradigm of what can I get into, okay, now what can I give? And I think that's a very exciting, it's a very exciting transition to see and to be a part of.
So you think that's how, we will collectively evolve, by all working on ourselves individually, and then in a sense that quantum entangles with the people outside of us. We all start to raise our vibration, or move into that sort of next level of consciousness, if you like.
Yeah, I think it's there's a Ram Dass quote that I really love, which is, I'll probably butcher it, but I'll try it anyway, which is, you can do nothing but work on yourself. I can do nothing. You can do nothing for me but work on yourself. I can do nothing for you but work on myself. And I really love that, right? Because it puts the locus of control back upon ourselves. And so, yeah, of course, we'd love to get out there and do lots of things in the world, but it's so fundamental that each of us just continues to raise our own vibration. And then, as you say, that's the mechanism that we affect others. It's as much as anything, I say to some of our clients, you could go sit next to one of our healers for a week and never do any medicine and never even exchange a word. You just go sit next to him or her for a week, and you will raise in your vibration, because it's energetic in its nature. And that's, if you had told me that 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you and said, that's not possible. So sometimes it's almost kind of like just such a paradigm shift to surprise myself. And the shift in perception, the shift in consciousness from a material 3D density worldview, which, I think, coming back to what you were saying before, we've got this very narrow band of perception, right? This mind, this thing, this brain, it's an antenna. And so at the moment, we're picking up a few channels, and we think that that's what reality is. And so as we expand the range of the antenna, we calibrate this thing, we decalcify our pineal gland, which is, the epicenter of our antenna, which is for most of us, it's super calcified by virtue of diet and fluoride in the toothpaste. Which I used to think was a conspiracy theory, but now it's proven. It's sitting on webmd.com. So we need to really fix our own antenna in order to have access to reality. And so that healing process is gradual, and it's so profound once we're able to access new channels. It's like, oh wow, this universe is subjective in its nature, and we're able to access so much more than what we have been taught. Material dense reality is, that we were taught in school. It's so much bigger and so much better.
Yeah, it's true. When you broaden your mind like that, you move outside of the mind. But so one of the things that I like to play around with altering my states of being, if you like, but I do that through meditation. And also the brain waves, which is also something I talk about in my book. So, we're moving through different brain waves and accessing different brain waves, and we now understand about the gamma and the lambda, where we're using our brain more holistically together. Is that sort of how that relates to psilocybin? That it allows, as you were talking about the different parts of the brain, so it opens them up, and then it allows the brain to work together. And when our brain is able to work so that all sides and all parts of it are working coherently, then that's when we not only feel better, but that's when we can start to experience different aspects of reality, different dimensions, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And what immediately came to mind is that with these experiences, there's plenty of people out there who have taken psychedelics for 20 years, and some of them are just lost on more dimensions, right? Their house is a mess, their relationships are a disaster. They don't have a job they like, they're full of judgment and negativity. So it's not that these medicines in of themselves are positive. What we're trying to do with these medicines is, as you were kind of alluding to, is to reach a higher vibrational state, to move up into a higher vibration. And so when we have that specific intentionality, we could wander around the infinitude of consciousness and see lots of stuff and have profound experiences. But when we have the specific intention to move up into a higher vibration, then I think more interesting things begin to unfold. So, often we need to travel down into the other polarity, into the lower levels of consciousness where there's, the really dark stuff, the shadow that is hidden from our consciousness. And so often we need to clear some of these lower level energies to be able to move back up into these higher vibrational states. And that's a journey that just continues to unfold over time.
Yeah, and so this is why, nothing is going to replace doing the inner work, and so, when I work with people, it's for me, I teach them journaling, we do belief work, we sort of do intuitive digging to understand, what's in there, what they need to release, what's holding them back. But I think the psilocybin is allowing them to go to a much, much, much deeper level, because it's, if you like, it's bypassing all of their conscious mind, all of their it's just going straight into the subconscious, which, as we know, is massively powerful. And to a certain extent, the subconscious is the energy field that we exist in. It's filled with everything in there.
It's all there. Very well said.
Yeah, it's all in there. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today. It's really fascinating. I could honestly talk for hours, but I know that we're limited in time. So, just tell people, how can they connect with you? Tell us a little bit about your retreats, your social media handles, website, things like this, so that they can understand how you can help them in their transformations and in their lives moving forward.
Yeah, happy to share. So all of our retreats are 1 week long. With most of our clients, we also support them before and after a retreat. But again, it depends upon the needs of the individual. And you can find us at Behold Retreats, behold-retreats.com. And we're on Instagram as well, at behold_retreats. So yeah, if what I've shared resonates and people are feeling called to a journey, I always encourage people to really spend the time and the energy to educate themselves on the space. It's one of the biggest decisions that you'll ever make. Who you work with is of utmost importance. And I don't say that to scare anyone. I just say that because I want people to be discerning in their decision-making process. So spend the time and the energy to educate yourself, to make a decision that you're very confident in and you won't regret it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And best of luck with it moving forward. And, let's speak again soon. Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.